Called the Black Pope by many of his followers, Anton LaVey began the road to high priesthood of the Church of Satan when he was only 16 years old and an organ player in a carnival. On Saturday night I would see men lusting after half-naked girls dancing at the carnival, and on Sunday morning when I was playing the organ for tent show evangelists at the other end of the carnival lot, I would see these same men sitting in the pews with their wives and children, asking God to forgive them and purge them of carnal desires. And the next Saturday night they'd be back at the carnival or some other place of indulgence. I knew then that the Christian church thrives on hypocrisy, and that man's carnal nature will out. From that time early in his life his path was clear. Finally, on the last night of April, 1966 Walpurgisnacht, the most important festival of the believers in witchcraft, LaVey shaved his head in the tradition of ancient executioners and announced the formation of the Church of Satan. He had seen the need for a church that would recapture man's body and his carnal desires as objects of celebration. Since worship of fleshly things produces pleasure, he said, there would then be a temple of glorious indulgence. Introduction. Bertin H. Wolfe. On a winter's evening in 1967, I drove crosstown in San Francisco to hear Anton Szandor LaVey lecture at an open meeting of the Sexual Freedom League. I was attracted by newspaper articles describing him as the Black Pope of a Satanic church in which baptism, wedding, and funeral ceremonies were dedicated to the devil. I was a freelance magazine writer, and I felt there might be a story in LaVey and his contemporary pagans, for the devil has always made a good copy, as they say on the city desk. It was not the practice of the black arts itself that I considered to be the story, because that is nothing new in the world. There were devil-worshipping sects and voodoo cults before there were Christians. In 18th century England, a Hellfire Club, with connections to the American colonies through Benjamin Franklin, gained some brief notoriety. During the early part of the 20th century, the press publicized Aleister Crowley as the wickedest man in the world. And there were hints in the 1920s and 30s of a Black Order in Germany. To this seemingly old story, LaVey and his organization of contemporary Faustians offered two strikingly new chapters. First, they blasphemously represented themselves as a church, a term previously confined to the branches of Christianity, instead of the traditional coven of Satanism and witchcraft lore. Second, they practiced their black magic openly instead of underground. Rather than arrange a preliminary interview with LaVey for discussion of his heretical innovations, my usual first step in research, I decided to watch and listen to him as an unidentified member of an audience. He was described in some newspapers as a former circus and carnival lion tamer and trickster, now representing himself as the devil's representative on earth, and I wanted to determine first whether he was a true Satanist, a prankster, or a quack. I had already met people in the limelight of the occult business. In fact, Jean Dixon was my landlady and I had a chance to write about her before Ruth Montgomery did. But I had considered all the occultists phonies, hypocrites, or quacks, and I would never spend 5 minutes writing about their various forms of hocus pocus. All the occultists I had met or heard of were white lighters, alleged seers, prophesiers, and witches wrapping their supposedly mystic powers around God-based, spiritual communication. LaVey, seeming to laugh at them if not spit on them in contempt, emerged from between the lines of newspaper stories as a black magician basing his work on the dark side of nature and the carnal side of humanity. There seemed to be nothing spiritual about his church. As I listened to LaVey talk that first time, I realized at once there was nothing to connect him with the occult business. He could not even be described as metaphysical. The brutally frank talk he delivered was pragmatic, relativistic, and above all rational. It was unorthodox, To be sure, a blast at established religious worship, repression of humanity's carnal nature, phony pretense at piety in the course of an existence based on dog-eat-dog material pursuits. It was also full of sardonic satire on human folly. But most important of all, the talk was logical. It was not quack magic that LaVey offered his audience. It was common sense philosophy based on the realities of life. After I became convinced of LaVey's sincerity, I had to convince him that I intended to do some serious research instead of adding to the accumulation of hack articles dealing with the Church of Satan as a new type of freak show. I boned up on Satanism, discussed its history and rationale with LaVey, and attended some midnight rituals in the famous Victorian manse once used as Church of Satan headquarters. Out of all that I produced a serious article, only to find that was not what the publishers of respectable magazines wanted. They were interested in only the freak show kind of article. Finally, it was a so-called girly or man's magazine, Night of September 1968, that published the first definitive article on LaVey, the Church of Satan, and LaVey's synthesis of the old devil legends and black magic lore into the modern philosophy and practice of Satanism that all followers and imitators now use as their model, their guide, and even their Bible. My magazine article was the beginning, not the end, as it has been with my other writing subjects, of a long and intimate association. Out of it came my biography of LaVey, the Devil's Avenger, published by Priamid in 1974. After the book was published, I became a card-carrying member and, subsequently, a priest of the Church of Satan, a title I now proudly share with many celebrated persons. The post-midnight philosophical discussions I began with LaVey in 1967 continue today, a decade later, supplemented sometimes these days by a nifty witch or some of our own music, him on organ and me on drums, in a bizarre cabaret populated by super-realistic humanoids of LaVey's creation. All of LaVey's background seemed to prepare him for his role. He is the descendant of Georgian, Romanian, and Alsatian grandparents, including a gypsy grandmother who passed on to him the legends of vampires and witches in her native Transylvania. As early as the age of 5, LaVey was reading Weird Tales magazines and books such as Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and Bram Stoker's Dracula. Though he was different from other children, they appointed him as leader in marches and maneuvers in mock military orders. In 1942, when LaVey was 12, his fascination with toy soldiers led to concern over World War II. He delved into military manuals and discovered arsenals for the equipment of armies and navies could be bought like groceries in a supermarket and used to conquer nations. The idea took shape in his head that contrary to what the Christian Bible said, the earth would not be inherited by the meek, but by the mighty. In high school, LaVey became something of an offbeat child prodigy. Reserving his most serious studies for outside the school, he delved into music, metaphysics, and secrets of the occult. At 15, he became second oboist in the San Francisco Ballet Symphony Orchestra. Bored with high school classes, LaVey dropped out in his junior year, left home, and joined the Clyde Beatty Circus as a cage boy, watering and feeding the lions and tigers. Animal trainer Beatty noticed that LaVey was comfortable working with the big cats and made him an assistant trainer. Possessed since childhood by a passion for the arts, for culture, LaVey was not content merely with the excitement of training jungle beasts and working with them in the ring as a fill-in for Beatty. By age 10, he had taught himself to play the piano by ear. This came in handy when the circus calliope player became drunk before a performance and was unable to go on. LaVey volunteered to replace him, confident he could handle the unfamiliar organ keyboard well enough to provide the necessary background music. It turned out he knew more music and played better than the regular calliopeist, so Beatty cashiered the drunk and installed LaVey at the instrument. He accompanied the Human Cannonball, Hugo Zucchini, and the Walenda's High Wire Axe, among others. When LaVey was 18, he left the circus and joined a carnival. There he became assistant to a magician, learned hypnosis, and studied more about the occult. It was a curious combination. On the one side, he was working in an atmosphere of life at its rawest level, of earthy music, the smell of wild animals and sawdust, acts in which a second of missed timing meant accident or death, performances that demanded youth and strength, and shed those who grew old like last year's clothes, a world of physical excitement that had magical attractions. On the other side, he was working with magic in the dark side of the human brain. Perhaps the strange combination influenced the way he began to view humanity as he played organ for carnival sideshows. On Saturday night, LaVey recalled in one of our long talks, I would see men lusting after half-naked girls dancing at the carnival, and on Sunday morning when I was playing organ for tent-show evangelists at the other end of the carnival lot, I would see these same men sitting in the pews with their wives and children, asking God to forgive them and purge them of carnal desires. And the next Saturday night they'd be back at the carnival or some other place of indulgence. I knew then that the Christian church thrives on hypocrisy, and that man's carnal nature will out no matter how much it is purged or scourged by any white light religion. Though LaVey did not realize it then, he was on his way toward formulating a religion that would serve as the antithesis of Christianity and its Judaic heritage. It was an old religion, older than Christianity or Judaism. But it had never been formalized, arranged into a body of thought and ritual. That was to become LaVey's role in 20th century civilization. After LaVey became a married man himself in 1951, at age 21, he abandoned the wondrous world of the carnival to settle into a career better suited for homemaking. He had been enrolled as a criminology major at the City College of San Francisco. That led to his first conformist job, photographer for the San Francisco Police Department. As it worked out, that job had as much to do as any other with his development of Satanism as a way of life. I saw the bloodiest, grimiest side of human nature, LaVey recounted in a session dealing with his past life. People shot by nuts, knifed by their friends, little kids splattered in the gutter by hit-and-run drivers. It was disgusting and depressing. I asked myself, where is God? I came to detest the sanctimonious attitude of people toward violence, always saying it's God's will. So he quit in disgust after 3 years of being a crime photographer and returned to playing organ, this time in nightclubs and theaters, to earn a living while he continued his studies into his life's passion, the black arts. Once a week he held classes on arcane topics, hauntings, ESP, dreams, vampires, werewolves, divination, ceremonial magic, etc. They attracted many people who were, or have since become, well known in the arts and sciences, and the business world. Eventually a magic circle evolved from this group. The major purpose of the circle was to meet for the performance of magical rituals LaVey had discovered or devised. He had accumulated a library of works that described the Black Mass and other infamous ceremonies conducted by groups such as the Knights Templar in 14th century France, the Hellfire Club and the Golden Dawn in 18th and 19th century England. The intent of some of these secret orders was to blaspheme, lampoon the Christian Church, and address themselves to the devil as an anthropomorphic deity that represented the reverse of God. In LaVey's view, the devil was not that, but rather a dark, hidden force in nature responsible for the workings of earthly affairs, a force for which neither science nor religion had any explanation. LaVey's Satan is the spirit of progress, the inspirer of all great movements that contribute to the development of civilization and the advancement of mankind. He is the spirit of revolt that leads to freedom, the embodiment of all heresies that liberate. On the last night of April 1966, Walpurgisnacht, the most important festival in the lore of magic and witchcraft, LaVey ritualistically shaved his head in accordance with magical tradition and announced the formation of the Church of Satan. For proper identification as its minister, he put on the clerical collar. Up to that collar he looked almost holy. But his Genghis Khan-like shaven head, his Mephistophelian beard, and his narrow eyes gave him the necessary demonic look for his priesthood of the devil's church on earth. For one thing, LaVey explained himself, calling it a church enabled me to follow the magic formula of 1 part outrage to 9 parts social respectability that is needed for success. But the main purpose was to gather a group of like-minded individuals together for the use of their combined energies in calling up the dark force in nature that is called Satan. As LaVey pointed out, all other churches are based on worship of the spirit and denial of the flesh and the intellect. He saw the need for a church that would recapture man's mind and carnal desires as objects of celebration. Rational self-interest would be encouraged and a healthy ego championed. He began to realize that the old concept of a black mass to satirize Christian services was outmoded or, as he put it, beating a dead horse. In the Church of Satan, LaVey initiated some exhilarating psychodramas, in lieu of Christianity's self-debasing services, thereby exorcising repressions and inhibitions fostered by white light religions. There was a revolution in the Christian church itself against orthodox rites and traditions. It had become popular to declare that God is dead. So, the alternative rites that LaVey worked out, while still maintaining some of the trappings of ancient ceremonies, were changed from a negative mockery to positive forms of celebrations and purges, satanic weddings consecrating the joys of the flesh, funerals devoid of sanctimonious platitudes, lust rituals to help individuals attain their sex desires, destruction rituals to enable members of the Satanic Church to triumph over enemies. On special occasions such as baptisms, weddings, and funerals in the name of the devil, press coverage, though unsolicited, was phenomenal. By 1967, the newspapers that were sending reporters to write about the Church of Satan extended from San Francisco across the Pacific to Tokyo and across the Atlantic to Paris. A photo of a nude woman, half covered by a leopard skin, serving as an altar to Satan in a LaVey-conceived wedding ceremony, was transmitted by major wire services to daily newspapers everywhere, and it showed up on the front page of such bulwarks of the media as the Los Angeles Times. As the result of the publicity, grottos, LaVey's counterpart to covens, affiliated with the Church of Satan spread throughout the world, proving one of LaVey's cardinal messages: the